story time. A girl named Akira Kendrick sent me this story, and the background of it is that her dad was very abusive to her mother, and her mother got custody of Akira, and her dad was not happy about that. Anyway, so Akira was with her aunt and her cousins at her grandmother's house, all on her mother's side, and her dad stops by to say hello. And Akira's outside playing with her cousin, and her dad comes up to her and grabs her arm and says, "Do you want to go to Walmart with me?" And at the time, she's only 7, so all she hears is toy aisle, so she says, "Yes, let's go." So they get in the car, they head to Walmart, she gets some really nice pom-poms, and then he says, "Okay, let's go back to your grandmother's house." So he starts driving and he gets on the highway, and Akira knows that her grandmother's house is right around the corner from Walmart, so he does not need to get on the highway. So she says, "Dad, where are we going?" And he gets really mad and says, "Shut up, sit down, it does not matter." So Akira's in the back seat, she's really scared, and she just shuts her mouth. So after being in the car for a while, they eventually arrived at this really old, abandoned, beat-up house. And when they walk in, Akira sees about 25 people, and she does not know any of them. Her dad brings her to a room, puts her in a little closet, throws her some toys and her pom-poms, and says, "Play." Part 2 is coming. Part 2 of Akira's dad literally kidnapping her. So when they get to the house, Akira is really scared. She doesn't know any of these 25 people. Her dad brings her to a room, throws her in a closet, puts some toys in there and says, "Play." So after about an hour of being in a little closet with some toys, she finally decides to get up and go look for her dad. So she opens the door and starts looking around, and there's no one in the house. There's not even a single trace of somebody ever being there. So of course she starts freaking out and crying. She doesn't know where she is. She's so far away from her grandmother's house, and she doesn't have a phone. And so eventually, after 3 hours, she hears somebody. She looks up and her dad is standing there, and he says, "Come on, let's go, the cops are outside." So basically, Akira's aunt called the cops and they had a search warrant for him. They ended up finding her dad and they said to him, "If you don't take us to her, you will go to jail." And obviously, from what I just said, he finally took them to her at this random old abandoned house, and they found her. And they ended up putting him in jail anyways, because why not? 2 years in jail and 1 year on probation. Don't steal children, people.
Story time about my psychotic best friend. So we're gonna call this girl Gia. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 9th grade. I saw Gia sitting at this lunch table alone, and I invited her to come sit with my friends and I. And after talking to her, I found out that she was a new student and she didn't have any friends. So her and I started hanging out and we became really close. Like, she would come over my house 24/7. Well, my older sister was a grade above us, and she would act really weird around her. And by weird, I mean she would always make fun of me in front of my sister, and weirdly enough, try to cause problems between us. My sister didn't really like her. She thought that she was weird, but because she was my friend, she was being super nice to her. Well, a month later, she started trying to become best friends with my sister. Any conversation she would have, I would be like, "Oh, do you want to come over?" She would be like, "No, sorry, I'm hanging out with your sister today." And I would go home and I would be like, "Hey, are you hanging out with Gia today?" And my sister would be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" For part 2. Part 2 about my psychotic best friend. So like I said, my sister was like, "No, what are you talking about?" So at this point, I'm thinking, oh, this girl's really weird. But it gets even worse. She comes over my house one day to hang out with me and goes in my sister's room the whole time. My sister dyed her hair black, so what does she do? She dyes her hair black too. The obsession was really weird. Anyway, so the one night that Gia's over, yes, I still had her over after this because I didn't think it was really weird at the time. My sister had her boyfriend over, and they were in the living room watching a movie, and the whole time Gia is begging me to go in the living room and watch the movie with them. So I'm like, fine, whatever, we'll do that. We go into the living room, we all sit on the couch, and my couch is kind of small, so we all had to squish. So she sits her ass right next to my sister's boyfriend. Well, my sister's boyfriend got up and started freaking the fuck out. Well, turns out that Gia was trying to touch him under the blanket. So I told her to leave. The next day, I got a whole paragraph of her saying that she just wanted to
Story time. I babysat a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and there was this one night that I was babysitting a 2-year-old. It was around 10 o'clock at night, so the kid was sleeping, and I was just sitting in the living room. In the living room, there was a big TV, a couch, and then behind me, it was a wall with a giant window. So it was really late at night, I had nothing to do, so I was Snapchatting my friends. If you Snapchat anybody, I'm sure you know that sometimes you Snapchat really fast. You don't even know or look at what you're sending. I was mass snapping all my friends, and then one of them replied 10 minutes later. And he said, "Who's that guy behind you?" And I turned around and no one was there, so I'm like, he's playing a joke on me. But then I get another Snapchat from this friend I had, and she lives all the way across the country. They don't know each other. And she said, "I think there's someone outside." So I was really freaked out because I was alone. There was a giant window behind me. Apparently there was someone outside. I wasn't gonna call the child's parents because I didn't want to freak them out, but I was scared. So then I went around the house, locked all of the doors. Sorry, it's a really long story, for part 2. Part 2. So yeah, there was a guy outside the window. So, yes, I did lock all the doors and everything. I made sure everything was secure. I closed the blinds. So, for the rest of the night, nothing else really happened other than this really weird thump. It was like someone was knocking on a window. Allow me to demonstrate. I ignored it because I was in denial that this was happening. The rest of the night was normal. The parents came home. I drove really fast home. And then the next morning I wake up. And apparently, an old man with Alzheimer's had escaped from his little home. I did not know this because it was dark outside, and even if I did see him outside the window, I wouldn't have known this. But he was naked. Naked. So it wasn't like a mass murderer outside the window, but it was a naked man with Alzheimer's looking at me through a window. It's not every teenage girl's dream, but it's really weird just knowing that a naked old man was staring at me through a window.
To a cop searching my car without my permission. So I see this police officer opening up my car door and putting his head inside my car. So I'm like, "Excuse me, officer, is there an issue? Why are you searching my car?" And he was like, "Oh, like, is this your car?" And I was like, "Yes, do you have a warrant?" And then he said, "Do you live here?" And I was like, "No, but do you have a warrant?" And then he said, "No, actually, the neighbor called me because he was concerned, and I actually live down the street, and the car was unfamiliar, so I felt the need to search it. I can't see inside of your car because of the tint, so I didn't know if somebody was in there, like maybe sleeping in their car or something." I don't really remember what he said, but I was like, "Okay, but I think you need a warrant to search the car. Please close my door." And honestly, he was pretty nice about it, I'm not gonna lie. I was just really annoyed because in my head, I'm thinking like, why? Like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm always getting caught up for doing nothing.
Story time of how I caught my teacher and my best friend doing the dirty. So everything was fine up until the middle of the year when she started acting really strange, and so did he. So at the time, I was 13 and she was 14. And I'm pretty sure my teacher was in his mid-20s or 30s. So basically, she's the type of girl who literally hates school and would do anything to get out of class. Then I noticed her getting early to class and not leaving until everybody else left. Then I started paying a little more attention, and he would always walk by her desk and slip her notes and candy and just weird stuff, and it was really, really strange to me. He also moved to her desk right next to his, which his was all the way in the back left corner of the classroom. He would also always make jokes with her, which I didn't really understand until I found out they were sleeping together. So on Friday, my mom messaged her parents asking if they could pick me up Monday because my parents were going out of town that weekend and I hated riding the bus. Well, I'm guessing she didn't know that I was going home with her Monday. So that Monday, I got into her mom's car and I asked her mom where she was. Her mom said that she was failing math and her math teacher offered to tutor her. This teacher was also brand new. I'm running out of time. Here's part 2 of how I found out my best friend was sleeping with our teacher. So continuing on with the story, I told her mom that I've never seen him tutor somebody before. Plus, she told me her grades were sky high in that class. I ended up forgetting my pencil pouch, which had my keys to my house in it, so I had to go back anyways. And when I went back, the door was locked. And like he had something over it or whatever, but I could see under it because he didn't cover it all the way. And she was on his desk and he was kissing her or doing weird stuff. I knew her mom wouldn't believe me if I told her what I saw, so I just told her it was an emergency and she was in trouble. So we booked it back to the classroom, and at first we didn't see them, and then she seen a foot come from beside the desk. Mind you, we're peeking under it, so we couldn't really see much. She started banging on the classroom door and screaming. I've never seen her this mad. I was honestly terrified that I ran into a separate classroom. The teacher to this day, I'm pretty sure he's still in jail, and she is still homeschooled and grounded with no phone. We found out that he was married with 4 kids. Well, was married.
This is the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Yes, this girl really faked her death. So at the time, I was 5 and my little brother was 3. It started off with my mom saying that she didn't feel well and she couldn't pick me up from school, so the bus would have to take me home. Well, a few months after, she started getting picked up from our house by this black car. She said that car was picking her up because of her so-called doctor's appointments. And she wasn't able to drive herself because she was too sick. Well, one day, when this car came to pick her up, she never came home. Me and my little brother were sitting around for a couple days waiting for her to come home, but she never came home, and we were young, so we didn't do anything. Eventually, my aunt came over to our house and told my little brother and I that our mom had passed away and that she was cremated and they kept the ashes. So our aunt started taking care of us. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by that same black car. That's when I started to get suspicious of everything and I decided to check these ashes. When I checked, it was flour. This is part 2 of the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Like like I said, my aunt told me that my mom had died and they cremated her and they let her keep the ashes and that she was going to start taking care of us. Me not knowing how long the cremating process actually took at the time since I was so young, I believed her. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by the same black car that my mom used to get picked up by before she died. That's when I decided to check these supposed ashes, and it was actually flour. So one day when my aunt got picked up by this black car, I decided to follow her. I didn't have a car, I was 5 years old, so I had to follow them by walking and hiding behind bushes. I was able to follow them up the street, and once they turned the corner, and there I saw my mom standing on the side of the street. That's when I see the car stop and I see my aunt get out and approach my mother. She tells my mom to give her money for covering for her and taking care of me and my little brother. Mom says she faked her death because my dad wasn't in our lives and she didn't want to take care of us anymore. I'm older now and I cut her off completely and I have full custody of my little brother.
Storytime Tinder edition. Okay, the story blew up on Twitter like a while ago, but I'm just gonna retell it because it's very informational. So there was this guy and this girl, and they met through Tinder, and then they met up and they went on this date. And they were out at dinner, and then she starts not feeling so well. And then she says, I really need to go home. And he says, yeah, I'll drive you home. And she says, okay. So then they get to her house, and then she starts feeling better. So then she says, do you want to come in for some coffee? And then he says, yeah, sure. So they go inside, they have their coffee, and then she doesn't feel well again. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel well again. I think you really need to leave. And he's like, okay. And he leaves. And then she goes to bed, and in the middle of the night, she wakes up, and she hears this noise down in her kitchen. And so she locks her door, and she calls the cop. And the 911 operator is just on the other line saying, can you just stay on the line until the cops get there? And then the cops get there, and they're like, the door is locked. Like, we don't think anyone's inside. And she's like, I promise you, someone's inside my house. I can hear them. She says, you have my permission to break down the door. So she's still up in her room, and then she hears the cops break down the door. And then she hears some wrestling and some fighting. Part two of the Tinder story. So then after the cops break down the door, they go upstairs and they knock on her door and they're like, it's okay, we've got the guy, everything's fine. And they say to her, we don't really want you to stay here tonight. We don't think that you should see what he's done. And when I say he, it's the guy that she went on a date with. And she's like, no, I need to see what he's done. So she goes downstairs and she sees her kitchen wrapped all in plastic. And there's a saw and a hammer and a knife. And earlier when he came into her house for coffee, he set his keys down right next to her keys. And so when he left, he picked up both sets of keys. And that is how he got back into her house. And they tested her, like her blood and everything, and she wasn't supposed to wake up because of how many drugs were in her system, because on the date, he drugged her. And then I guess he was just planning on chopping up her body in her own kitchen. I don't know. Stay safe.